Very good. Welcome to you this morning. Well, today it's Thursday, September 29th, 2022. We're talking AM Prime here. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for staying with us here. Lots to get through this morning. We'll be talking with Diane Haddad. She's the chairman of the Tobago Division of the Trinidad and Tobago Industry and Commerce Association. We get to her in the second part of the program, in the second hour. Of course, we have the COVID numbers that we will share with you. We have some regionals. We'll make some stops and the Newsday question and the responses. Other things on the program coming up in the next hour and a half. But right now, we're talking with Mr. Leroy Batiste. He's the president of the Public Services Association, and there were reports in the paper yesterday. In some cases, he had to clarify exactly what he meant. He said he would take what the government says it has on the table for back pay for workers in the public sector, for public servants particularly, because he represents the public servants as the PSA president. And there's some issues we want to get through with that, and how that is going to be, how is he proposing it, and to what extent there might be agreement on that. Leroy, good morning, good to see you.
Good morning, Andy, and good morning to your viewership.
All right, as I said in the introduction, there was some apparent confusion with what you meant by what you said, and you had to be clarifying it. So you've called the numbers. The minister said that money has been put aside to pay the back pay for at least one period or both periods between 2013 and now.
For two periods, between 2014, 2016, 2017, and 2019, Andy. So his figures was in relation to two periods.
Yeah, and so you're saying that if that is on the table, then give us it now.
Right. So, Andy, what we had was a Minister of Finance that was playing with some figures. And I want to stress playing with some figures. I would want, probably the only word to use is deliberately. He was calling figures, and the figures were to the tune of 500 million as the additional recurrent expenditure associated with settlement of negotiation in the main public service, and $2.4 billion to settle arrears up to June 2023.
Right.
He would have said those figures. And then he would have also created a segue when he said that when you extend it to the wider state sector, and then he doubled it up in essence. He was talking about approximately $1 billion, and then you have, I think it was in excess of $4 billion, $4.6 billion for the arrears. And then he juxtaposed that with the PSA. And then he looked at and said, the PSA is asking for 19%, and then talked about the PSA and created a nexus between the PSA and these numbers, where he allowed persons to perceive that he was giving the PSA this $500 million and for additional recurrent expenditure, and $2.4 billion for the arrears, but the PSA is asking for 19%. And then he went on to talk about the cost associated with that 19%.
Yes.
Yes? And he started to put some nice figures that attempt to portray the PSA as being outrageous. He used things like $1.8 billion, if my memory serves me right, $1.8 billion associated with the 19%. He then $15.8 billion, that's for the recurrent, and then he talked about $15.8 billion in terms of the arrears. And then he didn't find that wasn't good enough. He then add on to that the state sector, and then talk about $30.8 billion when you add it to, you extend it to the state sector, and some $4 billion for additional recurrent expenditure. And if that wasn't good enough, he then went on to assume extending the 19% to the other period, and then set about to say the PSA will cost the country some $50 billion. and equates that to the national budget. So he sets about trying to create this narrative that the PSA has been extremely unreasonable in terms of its proposal. A reporter would have called me, Andy, and juxtapose the two figures, the 500 million and the 2.4 billion as what the minister is holding out to the PSA to settle negotiations, as compared with the PSA looking for a $50 billion settlement. So, Andy, tongue-in-cheek, I would have told the reporter, 500, an additional recurrent expenditure, if the government is willing, if the minister is saying he's willing to give the PSA in settlement of the PSA's negotiation, an additional recurrent expenditure of $500 million annually, and to settle the arrears, $2.4 billion to settle the arrears, the PSA is quite willing to accept that. But we want no part of no 4%. Give us the actual figures so you know what equals the settlement for the PSA's negotiations, i.e. an additional expenditure of $500 million and 2.4 for the arrears, and we will sit with the CPO and see how to spend that on behalf of my 15,000 civil servants. And I was quite clear. So it has absolutely nothing to do with his notion of a 4%. It has everything to do with the figures that he would have held out and how it was perceived by members of the public that the PSA has been given a $500 million and $2.4 billion to settle a negotiation, but we want $50 billion. So, Andy, is in that context, the PSA would have said that we're good with the money. I want no part of that percentage. Let me be clear. The PSA has not accepted no 4% offer. If the government was to say that we signed something that says the cost of the settlement, you do with it as you see fit, i.e. 500 million and 2.4 billion, by all means, we will sign that.
All right. So let's get it clear. That will cover the arrears that that are to be paid, that public servants are due. And you're saying that you're basing that on the fact that the minister has said that this money is there, available, and waiting.
Yes. But Andy, and please note, and I would have sent you a bulletin that we sent out that clarified that. When I would have said that is with an understanding that the minister was being mischievous in how he was presenting the information. A 4% for my members would not even cost, will just cost over $50 million in annual recurrent expenditure. And the back pay arrears will be just around $300 million. That's the reality. It was deliberate on his part to misrepresent by holding out expenditure not associated with the PSA, but just to positioning the PSA's proposal with those monies. So hence, reporters, rightly so, allow themselves to believe what the minister intended. And as a consequence, they would have posed the question to the PSA, to myself, and I would have agreed with them if that's the figures that he's holding out as the settlement of the PSA for the 4%. Give me the figures. You keep your percentage. We will do with that money as we see fit. And that is what we would have said to them. But I want to be clear. That was just mischievousness on the part. Let me say, maybe that's a kind word, not mischievousness. It was deliberate in trying to create this impression of that the PSA is being unreasonable by associating our proposal with those type of figures, to the extent that you would say something like $50 billion and equate it to a national budget to suggest that the PSA was looking for a settlement to that effect. But that is not the case.
But is it a factor that, because I may have missed that, is it a factor that you have called for, you're putting a 19% increase on the table?
What has happened is negotiations we are involved in. I know you wouldn't know that because of the approach of the government. The government has been given ultimatums. They have not been negotiated. There have been a take it or leave it approach.
Well, the minister said as much. He said that 4% is the best we can do.
That's it. So that is not negotiations. Yes? What we would have placed on the table was our position, and we intend to meet and sit with the CPO and the government, and let's negotiate. And the PSA, besides putting out, so to be clear, 19% is what is on the table, but we expect that, like any negotiation, there's a give and take and a compromise. So what you ask for is not where it would settle. It will never be that, because it's negotiations. If in fact, the process was allowed to be engaged, actual and real and meaningful negotiations. But to be clear, on behalf of our members, outside of just a monetary settlement, we have given an opportunity to the government to settle these negotiations, taking into consideration other type of options that would have the effect to treat with the critical issues that we are dealing with on behalf of the public officers.
Now, what are some of those?
Well, the obvious one, Andy, is the fact that you have the impact of inflation on the income of our members. We have from 2013 to 2021, food inflation was in excess of 44%. Again, that is to say, that is as of 2021. We don't have 2022 figures yet from the CSO. But from up to 2021 was 41%.
You think it's more than that now?
Of course it is. You would have to probably buy double digits. You know, a loaf of bread now is $17.50 for one loaf of bread from KISS. Yeah? So it's probably double digit by now. You have to add to that 44%. So we could be talking about in excess of 50% is what food inflation is. Simply put, where you have if you were to go to the grocery in 2013, the goods that you could have bought with $100, it will take you $150 today or more to get the same items. That is what I'm dealing with on behalf of the members. The civil servants have become impoverished. The standard of living has been cut drastically because of the impact of inflation. So you will hear me say this, that I am not even looking to increase on behalf of the public officers. I have not even set out for an increase on their behalf. What we are looking for is that when these negotiations end, we want a situation where if your salary could have afforded you a certain value of goods and services, if we could get you back to that place, your salary affords you the same basket of goods and services, not anything more. When people talk about an increase, Andy, you perceive that if you were able to command a certain level, a standard of living, which your salary is now, if you get an increase, you're supposed to be able to do more. That is what is perceived by an increase. That is not what we're talking about. We are talking about putting back the workers in the same, just to maintain his standard of living that he had in 2013.
Right. So in 2022, what you're saying, the proposition is that people must be able to afford, for the same ratio, what they were having in 2013 in 2015, and what percentage of increase would do that? And you're not talking about an increase that will put you in a different bracket. This is just to get back in step with where you were money-wise 9 years ago. Exactly
that. You have core inflation, headline inflation was 22%. We even not disregarding food and fuel and all those that went up by over 100% fuel and food that went up by over 50% now. We are not even talking about that. We're just using 2021 had a headline inflation of about 22%. The simplicity is that the government claims not to have money. We have made a recommendation in terms of 2014 to 2016. Let's deal with that period. That period, the inflation was about 14%. So we hope to have a settlement for that first period where you have about 14% being placed back in the workers' coffers so that his standard of living would have been maintained between 2014 and 2016. But Andy, not only did we put a monetary consideration on behalf of the workers, we also put options for the government. If you don't have the money to give them, then let's find a way to improve the workers' purchasing power without an actual cash outlay. Among them being an improvement in the health plan on behalf of the public officers. So with that, he can have a card that he can simply go to his doctor and only have to find 20% of
the cost
associated with his health care, associated with pharmaceuticals, associated with his dental visit, because public officers complain of having to sacrifice their health to put food on the table. They suffer, they would lose a tooth because they could not access dental care. Again, to put food on the table.
All right, so let's understand this then. When you will say that the CPO is not negotiating, what you mean is that so he came first and said, well, 2%, and that was rejected. He comes back and says 4%. And so he's not dealing with these parts of the process, and that's why you accuse him of not negotiating, or you're accusing the government of not negotiating.
Directly so. They will come and read a letter to you, and that's the position of the government. That's it. That's it, Andy. There's no negotiation taking place. Yes? And let me be clear again for public officers. We even said to them, the workers and them we have workers who have been 15, 20 years as public officers, and they don't have an appointment. Let's appoint the persons. Let them be able to organize their lives in terms of long-term type investment. They need to have some stability in their security of tenure. So we have put that out for them. We look at things like giving them preferential access to homes. That is not new. This happened elsewhere. Fire, police.
So okay, again, let's understand this. With the prevailing situation in employment generally in the country over the last couple of decades, people are working on what I call the contractualization of work in the country, as opposed to people working temporarily. There's a great deal of contract work taking place in the public service, in the central public service, but that is quite apart from people just having jobs temporarily from one month to the next, or from year to year. Talk about that and how that is a feature of industrial relations in the country and in the public service, which is still new to how we understand in the public service to have been operating.
So the public service, you have the two coexisting. You have a situation of people being temporary, month to month, working from month to month for 15, 20 years without an appointment. So you have that. And you also have the proliferation of contract work, where people are on contract in the public service, and they have renewable contracts, and they're not given no tenure. And somehow some people are trying to romanticize these contract work as something is the best things in sliced bread. Our financial institutions do not recognize that. People, when you have those type of jobs, Andy, the workers are unable to plan their lives. They're unable to try to access a mortgage. They're unable any long-term plan. From contract to contract, for the contract workers, you have the situation where an uncertainty. People are living to not knowing whether they're going to be given a renewal. That is indecent. That's what they call indecent work altogether. And so those persons, we have asked for them to be regularized. If they're doing work of a continuous nature, then regularize the person so they can plan their lives properly. People could be long-term in their orientation rather than your horizon is the 6 months or a year or 2 years contract. So we want, if you have a job of a continuous nature, the people must be regularized.
Some part of the narrative says that in some cases people, I don't know what the percentage is, some people prefer that because at the end of every contract period, they get a kind of gratuity in a lump sum that they put aside and so on. But I want to go back to the fact that one of the first undertakings a former Minister of Labour did, Jennifer Baptiste-Primus, who was in fact the president of the PSA, was to have this symposium addressing these issues. But, or that issue about contract work in the public service, nothing came of it. And so the status quo remains. So those aspects of the negotiating process, those are not being addressed at all.
No. It's not being addressed at all, Andy. And I want to be clear. We even went on to, even with vehicles, you have a situation in this country where people are taking a mortgage for 7 to 10 years for a vehicle. Okay, so you don't want to give them an increase in their pay to meet and treat with the cost of living, but we know to get around safely in this country, everyone, you have no choice but to purchase a car. We say for the public officers, then when they purchase a car, do not take further money from them, i.e., motor vehicle tax, custom duties, VAT, so that you allow the little money that they have to be able to do more with it. So we give them options, Andy, that they can consider to come to agree with, which would have the effect of improving the purchasing power of the public officer. So then it will influence what kind of percentage increase that we could agree that treats with the issue at the end of the day to restore some measure of purchasing power, at least to the level that they were at in 2013, 2014.
So those things are part of the package of the proposals or the suggestions that the PSA has on the table with the CPU, but none of that is getting addressed. There's no discussion about those things around the table. In fact, to what extent around the table?
I am an eternal optimist. So from that point of view, is that it's still before the CPO. We have been urging the CPO and by extension urging the government, and I continue to do so, to meet and treat in good faith. Notwithstanding the posturing of ultimatums, the PSA is urging the government to meet and treat in good faith. Andy, to be clear, I want us to understand what the government's offer means. To a worker who is working for $6,000 salary, if I were to go and sign for 4%, that worker, for a 6-year period, that worker would get about just over $200
more
increase in his pay. To be exact, $242 if it's in fact a $6,000 salary. Andy, that's over 6 years. I would be agreeing that a civil servant, he's waiting from this is 2022. We are talking about 9 years after, that this worker is waiting to get a $240 increase for a 6-year period. That works out about a $40 a year that I am going, and they're saying the PSA is being unreasonable by rejecting that. And listen, what's the sad part in this, this money he's getting today, and he's spending it at today's rate, where the dollar that he's getting, it has lost half of its value, again, by the impact of inflation.
Yeah.
So you talking about a man that you want me to sign, that he accepts for 6 years, that the value of increase for each year, you giving him $40. When you have inflation rate, where food inflation was over $44, where you have gasoline, super gasoline, based now on the further increase, has gone up by over 158%. Right. And again, that is to say, if you had spent $100 in fuel in 2014 or in 2013 to fill your gas, to fill your tank, you will now have to find $258 to fill that tank. Right. If it's a diesel vehicle, it has gone up by 194%. Again, if you were spending $100 to fill your tank, you have to find $294 to fill your tank.
All right, my friend, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy.
All right.
Yes?
Leroy Batiste, President of the Public Services Association. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll share with you the Newsday question and responses from that. And then we'll be talking with Edie Stewart, President of the Registered Nurses Association of Trinidad and Tobago, ex-gratia payments for health workers. Let's see what he says about that. Stay with us.
The Guide family has been serving TNT for over 80 years. JE Guide Funeral Home and Crematorium, 2 locations, San Fernando and Princestown.
In this season, we talk more about health, wellness, and everything in between. I am so excited to share with you everything about health and wellness so that you can design the life that you've always dreamed of. Join me here on What's Up Doc. What's Up Doc, Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN, Content Capital.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers?
Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best.
I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in-depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the Content Capital.
Welcome back to the program. Moments from now, we'll be talking with Mr. Edie Stewart. He's the President of the Registered Nurses Association, commenting on the fact the government has put aside some money to say probably thank you to the workers in the health sector for their performance during the period of COVID in our midst 2 years ago, leading up to just recently. But right now, let's take a look at what the question is and what the ad responses are from the Newsday poll this morning. And the question was, which businesses or services do you think can implement a work-from-home policy and why? Well, here are some of the responses. The better question is, which businesses can't? Another response, that is not working, that is getting paid to be lazy. The TTPS, they don't do anything. And the final response, none, not with this lazy Trinbago mentality. So those are the responses to the question, which businesses or services do you think can implement a work-from-home policy? And why? Well, I thought that people performed splendidly during the heights of the COVID when people were working from home. But that's not maybe universal across the country. Right now, Mr. Edie Stewart, President of the Registered Nurses Association of Trinidad and Tobago. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me. Pleasant good morning to you and your listeners.
All right, let's talk about what do you call it? A goodwill gesture, a thank you gesture on the part of the government for making this payment available to. And when we talk about healthcare workers here, break it down for us. Who will benefit and who probably would not be?
Well, the information as the public would have been made aware, is the same information the association would have been made aware of. It's really short on details. The overall dynamic that they are indicating is 20,000 plus care workers, so we expect that is going to go for all healthcare workers. those in the Ministry of Health and those in the regional health authorities, because nursing personnel generally make up about half of the healthcare workforce, locally and internationally. And there are only about 7,000 nursing personnel in Trinidad and Tobago. So even if we were to double that, that's 14,000. So 20,000, the figure given by the Ministry of Health is quite a large number. And if one was just to do simple breakdown straight across the board in terms of the 210 million, you're looking at 10,500 per person. But I don't believe they're going to give that to each person. I believe they're going to, as we had recommended about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, during when other countries were doing it. They were doing it around Christmas time. Some countries within our region were also doing it. And they actually just doubled the person's salary. So we believe that is more along the line where they are going. We could be wrong because we don't have the specifics. We look forward to the Minister of Health presentation. It's really, I guess, the Prime Minister, because he would have initiated this, would have recognized the work nursing personnel would have been doing over the pandemic. And we are thankful for that, because historically, nursing and military personnel have not been recognized for the work they have been doing in generations, for generations. And one could only look at the recent Republic Day Awards, the national awards given out. We did not have a single active nursing person being recognized, even though the association put forward 2 names, active nursing, one in the community and one in clinical practice in the hospitals at the height of COVID. So it's generally that way. We saw a number of doctors being recognized. They generally are recognized every year. Several doctors get awarded. Several artists, sports personalities. The list is long, as we know. But generally, whoever is the body, they don't recognize nursing personnel. So I think this was a way to recognize nursing personnel, even though it's not specific for nursing, it's generally for all healthcare workers.
Right. So you're saying that the association would have made these proposals and communicated these proposals to whom? To the Minister of Health?
We would have approached the Prime Minister and the Ministry of Health on 3 issues. This is when the pandemic had initially started. And then within the first 6 months, actually just for the 20 January elections, we would have written to the Ministry of Health and also met the Prime Minister at the time. And the Prime Minister indicating that so this is a year being created by WHO, dedicated 2020 to recognize and value nursing personnel across the globe. And we had put forward as first and foremost, we had recommended and lobbied to get all nursing and military personnel permanently employed within our nation's institutions. Some 3,400 nursing personnel still remain temporarily employed, unlike any other service, unlike teachers, unlike police, fire, army. They are not temporarily employed, they are in permanent positions. However, they have relegated nursing personnel to temporary employment. We have also requested
is a similar kind of situation in the general public service, in the central public service, as the president of the PSA would have been saying moments ago?
Yes, well, and this is what we are saying. These are not temporary positions that nursing personnel are in. There's no forecast into the future that is saying we will need less and less nurses going forward. The data is showing the reverse. We will need more and more nursing. And the government confirms that by building all of these billion-dollar permanent structures. So it's already an oxymoron that we have on one hand, government building these billion-dollar facilities, brand new, all across the country, in Trinidad and Tobago, currently not fully utilized, currently operating well below their max capabilities, well below 70%. However, the staff you have working inside here are temporarily employed 1 year. And worse yet, they are not following the government dictates. If you are actually a temporary employee, if you are a contract employee, because they are not giving them gratuity at the end of their contract, they are just having them work. So you can imagine the precarious position nursing personnel are in, who are on these temporary contracts, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, what have you. You're not entitled to gratuity at the end of the contract, and then you're not entitled to pension when you retire. So you are really in a difficult situation. And with the announcement that we all know was coming in terms of the NIS payment, start at 65. You could imagine when a nurse retires at 60, they really have nothing to get other than the NIS payment, which is also in jeopardy at 65.
Well, let's understand is what you said earlier, so that probably physically wise, structure wise, there's this continuation of the construction of these modern looking buildings and so on. But you're saying the apparatus for functioning is not there. They are working, the buildings are sort of outfitted under par, and then the staff working is not meeting the expectations that are created by these new structures.
The infrastructure is there. They have done all the infrastructure. The infrastructure is wonderful. The areas that are lacking is consumables and human resource. So this is one of the reasons why the concept of having a new children's hospital was not really in sync with what we actually need in Trinidad and Tobago, because first to begin, a children's hospital requires specialists. We don't have those specialists. Actually, there's only one neonatologist in Trinidad and Tobago. I think they are training 1 or 2 other traditional neonatologists. We don't have an accredited neonatology program for nursing personnel in Trinidad and Tobago, an accredited pediatric program for Trinidad and Tobago. So we are building out all of these infrastructure, taking loans, might I add, finding ways to pay for these impressive looking structures, because we know it's a campaign strategy that you have built this, but the actual function of these institutions leave a lot to be desired. So we really, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better, because just with the allocation that has been given to the Ministry of Health, we already envisioned that we would not be able to staff those facilities. Even with the increase, it is almost unimaginable how we are going to be able to pay. Every time I have a meeting with these CEOs of the various RHAs and point all the shortfalls, owed increments, owed gratuity, lack of attendance on the ward to assist the nursing personnel with moving and turning patients to prevent bed sores. Every time we bring up issues of proper personal protective equipment, poor infrastructure at St. Anne's Hospital, where we just had a nurse so viciously attacked and injured by a patient. The response from the CEO, look, we are just scraping by month to month. We want to do some of these things, but we just don't have the funds to do it. Yet we continue to build additional facilities. So it's really one, and what is worse, you saying you can't make these persons permanent. And even before I go there, we want to first acknowledge that the finance minister actually promised in the budget debate, last year's budget debate, that he would have corrected this. It has come to his knowledge, and he's going to correct this unfortunate situation where nursing personnel are temporarily employed. So he made a promise 1 year ago. 1 year after, there's another promise of this ex gratia payment, but you haven't fulfilled the previous promise the year before. So we would want to remind powers that be, while it's good you are making these new promises, please fulfill the previous promises. And even more so, we have actually won a court matter against the very government, the NCRHA, that this practice is unfair and it needs to stop. So the industrial court have already judged this matter.
Yeah, so this practice is unfair. We'll just go back and just explain what you mean when you say this practice is unfair.
So we would have carried this matter. We actually took the industrial court a matter at NCRHA, because that was one of the regions high in temporary employment of nursing personnel. We would have won the matter about 2 months ago. And strangely enough, and the industrial court said, yes, this is against proper industrial relations practices. You cannot have someone indefinitely employed in temporary employment. And if you are going to put them on temporary employment, there's a rubric for how you do that. And it comes with gratuity, it comes with a number of safeguards. But really and truly, there was no explanation, no rationale, no evidence the authority could have explained to justify why nursing personnel are temporarily employed. So that matter was concluded, and the industrial court actually said not only for this particular nurse, which we brought this matter is, but for all other nursing personnel within the establishment. And even after that judgment 2 months ago, even after 1 year ago, the finance minister given this promise to make nursing personnel permanently employed, we have the shocking scenario where the NCRHA has appealed the matter. So the government has given a commitment, the court has given an instruction, and now the NCRHA is appealing a promise that the government has already said they would do. So we're wondering if the government's statements by the Minister of Finance, by the Prime Minister also, on Hansard, is really worth the substance, really worth anything.
So what you're describing here is a situation in which an institution of the government is going against what the political directorate is saying and assuring?
Exactly. And guess what they are doing? Like all government institutions, they are using your and my funds to go to the appeal court to fight against us who put them there. It's really unfortunate thing, and something needs to be done when institutions like these, we must be able to hold these institutions, because you're going to use our funds. You cannot pay nursing personnel owed gratuity, owed increments, make them permanently employed. After the government says, yes, we recognize we have been doing wrong over the years, after the court said you have been doing wrong over the years, you're going to take our taxpayers' funds, go to the industrial court, hire expensive lawyers. We now have to fight that matter in the appeal court, and don't know if when they lose, because they surely will lose, and let me not prejudice that. But if they lose, they will go to the Privy Council to try to override that. And again, it was our own taxpayers' money doing this. It's not their own personal funds, it's our own taxpayers.
All right, Mr. Stewart, thank you very much for talking with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Edie Stewart, the president of the Registered Nurses Association in Trinidad and Tobago. Industrial relations continues to be the issue on the top of the agenda for a lot of people in this scenario. Well, let's begin our look around the region. We want to go to St. Lucia, where the Minister of Education there is reported to be standing firm on the decision to keep schools closed on Monday due to inclement weather. We come with that after this break. Stay with us.
Come travel with us as we explore Diwali across the globe. Diwali is celebrated in many countries worldwide, but do you know the traditions and practices of each nation? From Guyana to Australia, WESN presents Diwali Passport, October 3rd to October 23rd, with replays on October 24th. It's Diwali Passport, a WESN exclusive.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
Welcome back to the program. As we said, consistent with just before we went to the break, we go to St. Lucia now, where the Minister of Education there is standing firm on a decision to keep schools closed on Monday coming due to inclement weather. We have a report from HTS News Force.
Better safe than sorry. Minister for Education Sean Edward is defending the decision taken by the Ministry of Education to close all schools on Monday, September 26th, due to torrential rains. St. Lucia was battered in the early morning by scattered showers and isolated thunderstorms. The bad weather would eventually give way to clear skies, but the forecast was still gloomy for critics who are casting clouds of doubt over the move.
I think the most important thing for us in the Ministry of Education is the safety of students and teachers. And in the face of inclement weather, you have to make a very quick assessment of the situation and make a decision. And this morning, given what we were faced with, we felt that we acted correctly in asking students to stay home.
The Education Department, in a widely shared Facebook post around 7:10 a.m. Monday, informed parents, teachers, and students that schools would remain closed due to the bad weather. However, some students were already en route to school.
The ideal situation would be for the notice to come out as early as possible, but you can't always be ahead of the system. So when they come. But we work very closely with the Met Office, with DEMO and other stakeholder agencies before arriving at a decision.
The minister is broking no compromise on the safety of the students, despite criticism that the move was premature and unwarranted.
Me as Minister of Education, I'm prepared to lose an entire week of instruction than having a child be swept away by floodwaters and then to reflect and probably think that the decision should have been made to close schools. So for us, it's really an assessment of the risk that we're faced with and make a decision in the best interest of students. And of course, safety will always be of paramount importance to the Ministry of Education.
Pundits have called on the Ministry of Education to make better use of the laptop program to ensure students are engaged with academic instruction on rainy days when school is out.
So we go to Guyana now, where additional measures would soon be placed at the port facility after the government and private maritime security are being trained to ensure the country's ports function effectively and safely, according to news source Guyana.
Additional mechanisms will be put in place soon that will require persons seeking employment at the various ports to be cleared by the Maritime Administration Department as it steps up port security and increased training and investment with support from Chile. Minister of Public Works Juan Elgil made the announcement today while delivering remarks during the opening of a port security workshop, which was supported by the government of Chile. With Guyana now deemed as an oil-producing nation, the Public Works Minister said the risk of a threat is greater, noting that the greatest threat to security is to believe that there is no threat at all.
Guyana is becoming and has become, and I think we should all be very appreciative of this fact, a country that is not just a little country somewhere down in South America, but it's a bright spot in our world. And the fact that our profile has been elevated, our risk has also been elevated. So we have to ensure that our ports are very safe.
To prevent the movement of illegal goods through the country's ports, Minister Edgell said Marriott is discussing several initiatives, including implementing a clearance mechanism for all port staff and increased surveillance with the use of ICT technology. It was explained that while shipping companies in the process of hiring persons conduct their own interviews, the government, through the Maritime Administration, will be implementing a second tier, where all employees must be screened by the department before they are allowed to work at the various ports.
One of the key initiatives that they've been talking to me about is ensuring that the people who work on all of our ports are not just cleared by your employer, but you are cleared by Marriott. And that is one of the key areas we're going, because the big question is why port security? We have to prevent the movement of illegal goods through our ports. And that's a big issue. We are working on ensuring that we see everything that happens on all of our ports by putting in the necessary IT infrastructure. And we have to ensure that the people who work there are not facilitating illegalities.
And noting that ships are often used for serious acts of terrorism, Minister Edgell emphasized that the necessary systems will be put in place to ensure Guyana does not fall victim to such acts. With the number of ships at the country's ports rapidly increasing, the minister said it cannot be business as usual. He added that investment without training would be detrimental. On that note, he also applauded Chile for offering Guyana additional support. Chile's ambassador Juan Manuel Pino Vasquez said in his address that with Guyana experiencing economic and social transformation that is unlike any other period in its history, it will soon demand more from its logistics systems. He said Chile is proud to share its experience in the area of port security with Guyana.
All right, so we have news on the hour. On the back of that, Diane Haddad, she's the chairperson of the Tobago Division of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce. Stay with us. This is AM Prime.
Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I am Marquise Akers. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Former Energy Minister says fuel subsidy became a runaway horse. IDA leader says oil and gas cannot be thrust for diversification. Chamber President says country can and should be managed like a business. In regional news, the IMF projects near 60% economic growth for Guyana. Now for the details. The fuel subsidy became a runaway horse and now it is practically gone. This according to the former Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs, Kevin Ramnarine, who questioned the minister's position given that he campaigned on a pro-fuel subsidy platform.
I think this Minister of Finance has taken a decision. I think he took it, and you know what is interesting is that he was of the other thought process when we were in government. He was pro-subsidy. But he's taken a decision to gradually whittle away at the subsidy. And for all intents and purposes, the subsidy is practically gone.
Mr. Narayan further argued that the minister based his budget on high oil and natural gas price assumptions. So
if you expect the price of oil to average, let's say $92.50, or average $70. You know, ministers of finance normally come a bit below that. The $92.50 is not an unrealistic number, the $6 per MMBTU is not an unrealistic number, but they are very high price assumptions.
The political leader of the Innovative Democratic Alliance, Dr. Denise Sawyer-Fat Angus, believes that there is no Tobagonian who would be satisfied with the budget. She argues that Tobagonians face inadequacies and inefficacies every day, and a larger allocation is needed if they are to be on par with Trinidad.
Once you're a Tobagonian and you live in Tobago and understand what we have to deal with in Tobago, there is no Tobagonian that would be satisfied with the budget. Tobago needs a larger injection of funds if it is to really become side by side with our counterparts in Trinidad.
Richie Sukai, the president of the Chaguanas Chamber of Industry and Commerce, disagrees with comments which suggest that the country cannot be managed as a business would. Mr. Sukai says investors look for the best returns for their money, which does not always have to be financial.
It is not just about pumping money. It is more about how you manage it.
Yeah.
I know recently we heard comments, you can't manage the government or even the country like a business. However, I disagree to a point like that, because when you, as a business owner, we look at our expenditures and our incomes. We look how to maximize every investment that we make so that we can get full
better returns.
Better returns.
Taking a look across the region, the International Monetary Fund said overall economic growth is projected to be 57.8% this year for Guyana as the country continues to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic-induced recession in 2020, protracted political transition and non-oil economic growth. The IMF Executive Board said the country started the recovery process in 2021 despite being negatively impacted by floods. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I am Marquise Akers. Thanks for watching.
Come travel with us as we explore Diwali across the globe. Diwali is celebrated in many countries worldwide, but do you know the traditions and practices of each nation? From Guyana to Australia, WESN presents Diwali Passport, October 3rd to October 23rd, with replays on October 24th. It's Diwali Passport, a WESN exclusive.
Welcome back to the program. Well, in today's edition of the Newsday Tobago, the headline is a painful budget, and that comes from one of the business leaders on the sister island, the vice president of the Hotel and Tourism Association. She says it's painful. She looks at the numbers and says this wouldn't work. She's criticizing the decision by the government to raise fares on both the air bridge and the sea bridge. Well, here's another representative of the business community there, Diane Hadders. She's the chair of the Tobago division of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce. No stranger to us around here. Good to see you.
Good morning, Andy, and good morning to your viewership.
Well, we're good to have you. So, what is your take on it? Is that consistent with what other people in the Tobago business sector are saying? $57.6 million as a fiscal package is just not going to cut it?
Let us understand that that budget was very uncaring, not just for Tobago, but for Trinidad and Tobago. And from the Tobago perspective, well, it was more of the same. It was the cut and paste directly out of what is Tobago's normal give, which would be the 4.03% under law. And it's back to the same 300 million for capital expenditure and the 18 million URP. So the URP people can't even expect anything different, and 9.2 for CPEP. So it's the same thing over and over. I don't know how that takes the island to move anywhere forward. They did not treat with the Land License Act to remove it so that we can actually attract investment. So it's almost as though they want to control the investment and who gets to invest from central government perspective, because nothing that still resides at the Minister of Finance office in terms of those approvals. So it seems that the airfare, the seafare, I don't want to be misinterpreted, which I seem to have been. I did not agree with it. I think the sea fare is not bad, and I have to say what I agree with. I agree that between 60 and 65, I don't think we are very creative in this country when coming to ideas. I do not see why between 60 and 65 that should be free. I think if there was to make a change, the change could have been from 65, you will probably enjoy free travel. But I think the age limit could have been changed. $25 will probably cost more to print the ticket and to process the whole transaction than charging $25. So I think we have a shortage of ideas. The other aspect is the airfare. I want us to understand that that's a possible $500 fare, because they have already implemented a $50 penalty on either side if you miss your flight. So having said that, it's now $400 by the minister's statements. And Algon Craftley said it's going to move from 150 to 200 one way, silently said. But that's a $400 return fare, because neither does Trinidad come to stay in Tobago or Tobago goes to stay in Trinidad.
That's a good point. Why did he choose to talk about a one-way fare?
Because it's always crafty. It's what politicians do. That's how it's written. So it's a $400 fare now, and if you miss your flight, it's a $500 fare, because you will have the penalty of $50 on either side to pay. So we already have that penalty, which was implemented earlier.
Yeah.
So that penalty, nobody said it was going to be removed, and therefore, immediately, I want Trinidad and Tobago to recognize that your fare is $500. So if you don't, or you're going to stand up and wait, stand by.
Okay, but on the penalty, is that not sort of standard with airfare anywhere? But you're saying that maybe there's a difference if you're going out of the country as opposed to going to Tobago and so on.
So
or coming from Tobago to Trinidad.
It's standard, I'm saying, at the risk of sounding repetitive, and I think I should tape this and just give it to everybody to blast on the stations. The airfare, the air bridge, and the sea bridge represents Tobago's highway to Trinidad.
Right.
Right? So I always take away the Trinidad aspect of it, because there are many services that are not available on the island of Tobago.
Yeah.
And for you to be effective to get anything done, you necessarily need to get to Trinidad. And therefore, you have simply punished and penalized the people of Tobago, who are citizens of the supposed unitary state of Trinidad and Tobago. So I hear everybody about the cost, but again, we seem to have been duped into many things, and the education of our people as how our countries run. I think somebody needs to get more truthful and speak in language that everybody can understand and stop fooling us. All the citizens know is once gas goes up, we're going to be living a higher cost of living, etc. But I don't know that we explain to people that we are being duped and not being told the truth for many years. And I think at some stage that needs to be cleared up.
That has to happen. Yeah. Also, let's come back on the payments then. You were making a point about what the impact of some of these increases will be.
Well, it is going to affect the standard of living of everybody. These increases are just uncaring. They are going to be disruptive. We're already facing all of the effects post the pandemic's economic crash. And whereas other countries, and I hear our politicians so proudly refer and try to classify us next to another country that has totally different brain matter being applied to what they do, that have a totally different culture to their levels of productivity and so. And yet, we are trying to use that as an example, you know. So I've sat in many meetings and heard Singapore to be the model. Please get real. We are nowhere near there. But now the latest is we are coming down to classify us and compare us to what Barbados cost us. And so Bajans have tourism. Bajans earn foreign currency. Bajans did not reject investment. Bajans has a pretty open place. They have a prime minister who is quite resilient and open to how she's going to carry her people through whatever. She has stood up and spoken like that. She has acted in that. So we could get away from us trying to compare ourselves there. And maybe we need to start to compare ourselves more to, at the risk of sounding really bad, probably more Haiti and how things are done there, because our mindset seems to not be one of progress, but it seems to be very regressive. So I would have said since March of 2020 that the real tool is going to be what we need to use post-pandemic. How are we going to get out of the effects of it? So the bankers would have been accommodating during the pandemic because, you know, Andy, everybody didn't know whether they would live or die, whether this was the end of the world. Nothing mattered. I was so caring and loving. And for those who hid under the bed, I was scared. So everybody had a different role that they played. However, the true maths came out as soon as the effects of the pandemic were more to the end. And therefore, that is where the country is at. And the help was never given, properly distributed in this country in a meaningful way to keep our economics afloat. And it's still not there to get us out of where we are. So I have to say that whether it is we have a starvation of brain matter or we have some sort of health issue, we need to get past comparing ourselves to islands of people that actually think constructively for how we are going to do things in a meaningful way.
Not even when the minister says, well, inflation-wise and so on, we're doing better than Barbados and the comparisons he made and so on. To say that we are in step with some of these countries and we should not feel about ourselves some of what you're suggesting there.
I would want to ask for them to give me the data of the standard of living of the Bajan as compared to the standard of living of the citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm talking about not the privileged few who benefit in different forms, be it honest or dishonest. I want to speak about the mass in the middle and that mass in the middle that was once called middle class, that has no class anymore, and the mass that's called the social net that we keep trying to throw these people in and capture them rather than develop them and give them equal opportunities for their education to change what they do and how they do it, so we could stop keeping them there as a voter bank, so we could stop keeping the minds all cluttered and mossy so that they don't grow. I don't want that. That's not where we should be, Andy. So no, I want to say that once those things don't exist, let's go and do proper comparisons.
Yeah, but you say that it's your considered opinion that we should more properly be compared with Haiti and so on.
Yeah, let's really go and see where we line up. Stop fooling ourselves. Maybe they can put a fund together and get a genuine team to go and do on-the-ground surveys, not sitting down and talking about what they supposedly read and maybe our hoax documents that we probably have that makes us look good, or we talk something that isn't real. I think the real comes from what we hear from people who genuinely call and tell you of their stories. And that's been overpowering over the last, I want to say 15, 20 years or more, where we have been going down a road, a slippery slope. We are going to hell in a handbasket without conscience.
So there's nothing celebrating here for the people of Tobago, to the extent that there is any cause for celebration in Trinidad as well?
No, Andy, and I want to say so for both aspects. And I also want to say that whilst Tobago would have always needed the allocations that it asked for developing the island, the Chief Sec at this rounds actually did do an excellent presentation as to why. I thought that budget presentation was well done, and I had said so publicly. And I thought that it would have it's almost as though if you went to court and you were representing a situation, I thought, or whether you were in a marketing or sales and distribution company or branding and you went into your bosses and did a presentation on the table to get funding to do your branding and so, I thought it was well done. And it brought nothing. Yet we have the minister speak to the fact that because the opposition did not approve an autonomy bill that was not the request of the Tobago House of Assembly's language, that it was changed according to what the administration in Trinidad wanted, and then you blame the opposition for not voting on it. It wasn't what the people of Tobago wanted anyway. That's not what was asked for. So you need to give them what they asked for after you negotiate on the table. That document must come out to represent what the agreement is, not what you want to give.
What is that? How does that make for the politics going forward, let's say over the next 12 months, between the government in Port of Spain and the Assembly leadership?
That's a trick question. That's a trick question, Andy. I have no clue. I have no clue what will happen. What I know is we have some sort of lockdown and stalemate at this time based on what Mr. Farley would have laid in the House last week about the corruption that they would have claimed, the audit that they are doing on construction. And all that is going back and forth in the media as to what and who are the persons that would have benefited from monies that are unaccounted for, roads that we never got but are signed off for to be paid for, things like that. And I mean, if we have one administration in Trinidad, the same administration in Tobago, and all of that going on, it speaks to a lot. It really puts us in, I want to call almost a sympathy state. It's sad. It's sad that when money was passing and the opportunity was there, that what we did, and it almost read to me like we funneled the money through the THA and funnel it back out to Trinidad. So really and truly nothing happened for the island of Tobago. And it's sad because the roads are in a terrible state. Never seen before looking like that. And so we really need to, I pray for the people who have chosen to lead.
Yeah, you want to stay with the issue of the increases for the sea bridge and the air bridge. The rationale part of it, at least, is to say that these facilities, don't make money, and that the attempt is to try and sort of lessen the burden on the Treasury. And if you have to, there's no alternative but to try and recoup some of that this way.
And I am saying, listen, I don't disagree that the port, maybe the fare by boat was, probably needed to adjust or whatever. I want people to get what I'm saying. We have not addressed the productivity levels at the Port Authority. We have not addressed how efficient we are. We have not addressed what delivery we give. We have not addressed service standards. We have not addressed any of these things. All of them turn into money at the end of the day. And I have not heard any of that in any budget to assist in getting our country out of where it is. And I'm saying that it is a big flaw. So to the people who produce, it becomes punitive. Those people are punished. And to the people who just do nothing and get away with it and get paid, they continue to do the same thing and the country's just going nowhere. So to the people who benefit in one way, where they just do nothing and get paid, they become a voter bank and they are happy and they stay there and that works for them. And that's because they have not developed their internals where it's what do I want in terms of my growth, my own development, what do I want in terms of for my family and so. So they're kept down. That's why I say I will speak to Haiti. They're kept down mentally. And when they're kept down mentally, because nobody speaks to them in a manner that brings light to how do you develop you, that human capital, then we are stuck. And because we are stuck and the budget has addressed none of it, then the hardship just keeps coming down. Well, of course, there's a cost to our inefficiencies. Of course, there's a cost to our ineffectiveness. Of course, there's a cost to our unproductive behavior. But what have we done? Nothing to change that. So clearly it suits somebody, but it is not helping the country. And therefore, the people who actually get up and toil every day and go out there earnestly to do what they have to do, they become the ones that cannot live a decent life. They are punished. It becomes punishment for them. So they get tired, frustrated, and just maybe I should join the bandwagon of thieves. So whether I thief time, whether I thief effectiveness, whether I thief efficiency, whether I thief money, it all turns out to the same dishonesty, you know. So let's be clear.
Yeah, is there a difference in that kind of thinking, that kind of ethic among people in Tobago as opposed to Trinidad, or it's a national malaise that we have to get at the root?
It's a national malaise that needs to be addressed from the root, and it will need correct leadership to do so. I see in Tobago, it's a smaller space to fix, and I think if Mr. Augustine continues to carry out maybe what he deems to be that, I would imagine that Tobago can change, and hopefully the virus, you know, the virus of productivity and the virus of good governance and living will probably fester into Trinidad. And I may be using this all crazy and back to front, but hopefully it will fester into Trinidad and we will have our own pandemic of change for the better.
And none of that none of that promise will be compromised by what is happening internally in the party that is in governance in Tobago.
Well, I want to say that as I've been asked that question just a few minutes ago on a previous interview, I am not going to get involved in that fiasco. What I would ask is that the brotherhood be mature and recognize that when they ask people to vote for them, that they made a commitment to God's people, and that the leadership is not about whatever it deems for you or for me. Leadership is about the whole, and they need to take that into account, and they need to treat with it so that they treat with the whole, which is the people of the island's assets, the island's physical and material. So without saying more on that, Andy, I will ask that they have some sort of mind that is controlled at that stage by the leadership mandate. Let me say the correct leadership mandate, the one I just spoke of, and have that take them forward, whatever it means. So if it means a split, if it means a come together, whatever it means, that they do the right thing in the best interest of the people of Tobago.
All right, I want to close out on the budget. You have no sense of optimism at all about what this will mean in Tobago for the next 12 months. This budget is a waste of time, and it's going to create more frustrations. And I'm simply trying to paraphrase what you're saying.
Well, I don't know that you said. I don't know that's what I said. But what I know is we didn't hear anything on the Land License Act. We did not get anything for any sort of development, investments. So it seems as though it's a punishment. There seems to be some measure of punishment for the people of Tobago. So you vote us out, maybe we'll deal with you. We need to fix all of that. But no, I never give up. I am somebody of faith. So I will never give up, Andy. And I will not encourage my members to give up either. What I do know is there comes a point in time where you do shrug your shoulder and say, you know what? Maybe I need to release it. And I need to there's this saying, let go and let God.
Yes.
So maybe it's the stage where we have to do and let God show his hand as to how he's going to deal with it. And whatever he deems dealing with it, so be it. But it was not a good budget, and it was disappointing in terms of where we were and where we came from, because I spoke to a friend in the US who has business out there, and she told me that they got government checks that took them through the pandemic to keep the economy rolling. So all they were dealing with something called COVID. Their government kept the economy going. We kept speaking about lives and lives and lives. But guess what? We killed livelihoods. We totally killed our economy.
And that was the mission, to preserve lives and livelihoods.
Well, we always lose the mission. So it's sad, but we have a lot of bills that we declare. We had such great health and whatever. People were awarded for all the great things we did. That will be another topic for another year, because as history moves, we will hear more about all of the realities of what took place.
All right. Thank you very much, Stan Haddad.
You're most welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right. You're always inspiring with the things you say. And you know, it creates more discussion and more energy for people to talk some of these things. Good to see you.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's just tell you what's on the front page of the Newsday today. Trini's in Ian's path. That's the hurricane that is doing its thing, going up in the United States, in Florida, and heading elsewhere. That's the front page, and this is the back page. I'll tell you what's on the Newsday. Tobago, of course, they're still talking about the budget. They call it painful. And some sports stuff in the back page. You should check these things out. But that's our broadcast for today. We want to thank you for watching. As usual, we tell you can get in touch with us here at AM Prime at WESNCC on all our social media platforms. You can send your emails to amprime@wesncc.com. In about half an hour, we have news on the top of the hour again, followed by today's edition of Talking Point with Shah and Small. But for now, that's it. Thanks for watching, and we see you next time.